What's good, everybody? For those of you guys who are new to my channel, my name is Sydney Baker Green. I'm an international photographer, cinematographer, and colorist, and I am so excited that today's video is finally here. Today, we are going to be packing all 8 classes from my live DaVinci Resolve color grading course into one single video. That is right, 10 hours of total instruction packed into one 45-minute tutorial. This is my way of not only saying thank you to all of you guys who have not been able to attend my live DaVinci Resolve color grading course, but also to all of you guys who have helped me get to 25,000 subscribers. I hope this not only gives an insight into my color grading process, but also shows you how you can use the power of color theory in pre-production, in your knowledge of color theory in pre-production, to get the look that you want in camera and then execute it and make it better in post-production. Like I always teach my students, color grading starts in pre-production, not in post-production. So without further ado, class is in session. All right, guys, so here we are in DaVinci Resolve. I just want to recap a little bit before we get into this YouTube video. My DaVinci Resolve color grading course is 8 to 10 hours. I am packing in as much information from that into this YouTube video. Therefore, if I do go through too fast, through a concept or anything like that, please let me know in the comments down below, and I'm gonna do my best for you guys to answer those. But we will be just going through, you're not only gonna get a look at my color grading process, right? The actual creating of the looks, but before each clip that we grade, we are also going to talk about what my vision was for the look, why I made certain decisions in pre-production, because I teach my students all the time, color grading starts in pre-production, and we're gonna see just how that plays into effect when it comes into creating our look in post. So let's go ahead and start off with setting up our color grading pipeline. So the first thing that I do in any situation is I go to File, Project Settings, and Color Management, the Color Management tab right here. Everything that we do in my color grading course is going to be color managed. So we're going to change our color science to DaVinci YRGB Color Managed and to the DaVinci Wide Gamut for the color management preset. You can see here that this is an extra wide gamut for log color grading, and it's suitable for SDR and HDR deliverables. That's standard dynamic range and HDR. What this basically does is it takes our footage, puts it in a wide gamut that's capable of producing HDR imagery, but then it brings us back into standard dynamic range or whatever color space we choose to output. So we can actually go into ST2080 if we wanted to, which is HDR and keeping it in HDR. But what we're confining it to with Rec 709 is standard dynamic range. And what you guys do for the most part is exactly that, Rec 709. If you're on YouTube, shooting wedding videos, or delivering anything to online content and even broadcast, SDR is where you're gonna wanna be. So let's go ahead and save that. And what this does is that you saw the shift right here. That allows us to get information over 100 nits, which is SDR. So you will see that in just a second. But first, we have to go in and select our color space. So from here, we left click on the clip here, and this is over here on our clips tab. We left click on that, we click input color space. What does this do for us? Well, it allows us to see all the available color spaces we can choose from. So this is where you would choose what you shot with, right? If you shot with Blackmagic Film Gen 5, you would select that. If you shot it in Canon Log 2, you're gonna choose that. If you shot it in S-Log 2, all the way down here, you're gonna choose that with the gamut that you used, right? In this case, we're gonna select Arri Log C. Now let's go ahead and talk about the look, right? What was I thinking when I chose all the variables in this image? I had him wear white and black because those are neutrals and it's not going to complicate our scene too much, and we have control over other variables. So where we're going to end up creating a look here is going to be with the LED ceiling that we can change the colors of, the intensity of, and the lighting of, right? So he's actually being lit by a white light, and then I was able to change these colors to get them as close as I wanted. Why did I choose these colors? Well, if we take a look at our vector scope, we have about 3 colors next to each other. That is the definition of an analogous color scheme. And I want it to go with these colors because I feel like they're gonna add enough color contrast to also separate him. But we're gonna break this rule a little bit. We have our 3 colors, right? We have our red, we have our purple, and our blue, as we can see listed here and on our vector scope. But we also have his skin tones, which are gonna fall on this orange red. That to me is a different color. And what we also are gonna do here in this little strip, I'm gonna push this to teal. Why am I gonna push this to teal? Because it's going to be the perfect complement to his skin tones, right? So once I go in and adjust his skin tones where I want them, I'm gonna go ahead and work on this ceiling to make it pop a little bit more and then just to add that contrast where his head is at right there. That way, even though we have a lot going on, it's not going to be too busy that we lose sight of him, but it will look pretty dope. Yes, this is Batman's garage. Yes, this is where Lady Gaga shot Bad Romance, Katy Perry shot 365, Popsicle LA. I love this studio. So let's go ahead and start with our actual grading now. So node 1 is always going to be our initial exposure corrections. So just kind of getting us a nice starting point, and then I'm also going to go ahead and do any temperature adjustments here since node 1 has the most information. So the first thing that I'm noticing, we're going to get our waveform up and we're going to make sure that we're in the Y tab and our extents are on so we can see our top and bottom values. I'm going to bring down the exposure just a little bit because it is a little bright for me. And so I always start with the global to get myself exactly kind of where I want to be. I'm gonna back off of that just a little bit. Now the thing to keep in mind again with the HDR wheels is that we want to be very conservative with some of these movements. The nice part about these is we can individually see the ranges that we're affecting. So I know I'm affecting this region in the lights, this region in the shadows, this region in the dark, so on and so forth. Just keep it very conservative. Now, I want my dark values, my blacks, I want them to almost be black on an LED display. So that means they need to come down to around the 0 nits mark, but we don't want them to hit 0 because then the LEDs on the TV or on the display will turn off. So I'm gonna use my shadows and I'm gonna bring those down just a smidge. About half a stop is where I'm thinking about bringing those down, so right about there. And then for my darks, I'm gonna bring those down just a little bit too, just to affect that bottommost region right there. Okay, so before and after of what we have going on so far, you see we added that contrast in. Now on the lights, I'm gonna bring those down just a little bit too. I'm not gonna mess with the highlights because I don't wanna affect too much of the ceiling. I wanna work with that independently. So again, I'm just trying to get this starting point going. And so in these lights, I'm gonna bring those down a little bit more than half a stop because I don't want this to be overly punchy. So do you see where we're at right now? We've got this very, very nice starting point with everything going on, and all this information is coming in around 1,000 nits, which is where we want it to be. The other thing that I noticed is that this scene is very magenta, so I'm gonna go ahead and add in a little bit of green to get us to where I wanna be, to get a nice looking skin tone. So this is exactly a very nice starting point. Now you might be like, well, it's looking a little dark now. This is where we go in and we really kind of remap that exposure. That's what I call my node 2 is my exposure remapping. I love calling it that. Don't ask me why. But from here, what we're gonna go ahead and do is we're going to add in the values that we want using our curves tool here. So from here, first thing I'm gonna do is I'm actually gonna increase the mid-tone detail because I want this to pop just a little bit more. It does something crazy with the skin tones, but we'll come back out and fix that. So you can see that adjustment here. It just adds a little bit of definition. And then I'm gonna push up just a little bit on that exposure, but then I'm gonna bring down this very, very bottom region of the blacks right here. Just a little bit. Just a little bit. I'm also gonna go back to this one and increase my saturation just a little bit. And so now I feel like we have a very nice starting point. This is a very subtle change, but it was a change that I feel like is needed to really get this scene to pop and stand out a little bit more. And so we can get that attention on his face exactly where we want it. I don't want to go too hard. I'm gonna bump that up just a little bit more. And I chose this, remember, these tools are all the same here, guys. The reason why I chose the curves tool is because it's allowing me to get to my point a little bit quicker. This is the tool that is going to be the quickest and the most precise when it comes to control because it's basically an exposure ramp. blacks to whites, shadows, midtones, and highlights in the middle, and you just choose exactly where that is. So I know his skin tones sit kind of in this upper region already, especially when we're looking at it on the waveform, we can see with that indicator that it is in the upper region. So that's all I'm doing right there. It's just making sure I bump up that corresponding value. Now the next thing we're gonna go ahead and do is we're gonna key out the skin, right? Now, this is where I said we're gonna undo some of what happened. So we're gonna go into our qualifier tab here. And I'm gonna click on his skin tones right there. And then we're going to really narrow down exactly what it is that we want. So I just want the orange of his skin and some of his lips. And then make sure we're just getting all corresponding parts of that. I'm gonna actually go back and undo that. There we go, right about there. And it's okay that we're pulling in some other parts of this image. That is completely fine. That's to be expected. And I can always come through and change this mask if I need to, right? But I don't think we're going to need to right now. The only other thing I'm gonna do, because we have these sharp edges, is I'm gonna blur the radius by quite a bit. I'm going to do a little bit extra. Now, you may be like, Sydney, this isn't a clean mask. Don't worry, you're not going to be able to tell really at all because it's gonna be very minor shifts, and that's actually motion blur right there. So that's what we have going on there. Now, how do I approach skin tones? Well, the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna take away that mid-tone detail that we put in to just the sky over here and the whole image. We have 55 here, so let's do minus 55. So that his skin now looks pretty nice and neat. If you are new to grading skin tones, I would go ahead and advise that you put a mask over the skin, a power window, turn on said power window right there. If it's not showing up, simply go to your gamma or your regular primary wheels, move the gamma tab and reset it. Looking at our vector scope, I already knew he was pushing towards magenta, so I'm going to use the offset to correct it back on towards that line, and then I'm going to go ahead and in the shadows add in some blood flow. That's the simplest way that I'm going to be able to explain skin tones. Now, I don't rely on that line anymore, so I'm just going to turn off that power window and turn off the mask so I can see what's going on. But you would keep that on in the event that you were going to end up grading, and watch as you make those adjustments. So I'm going to move him closer to where I want him over here. So I'm canceling out that magenta by adding in that complementary color. And then I'm gonna look at the shadow area of his skin, and I'm just gonna pump in a little bit of that orange red to represent the blood flow on the bottommost region. And right about there is where I'm going to leave it. That's a very more natural looking skin tone correction overall. I like that a lot more. And you see it affects his hair a little bit, and we kind of affect this a little bit, but not too much where it's really like crazy and overdone. And we blurred that radius so it actually just looks like a transition coming in on the LED ceiling here. From here, we can really go in and start the foundations again of our look creation. So I'm gonna go ahead and add a layer here. So go ahead and do that. And what I'm able to do here is I'm able to pump in a little bit more mid-tone detail now because I'm not affecting his skin tones. Remember, with layer mixers, bottom goes on the top. So we have a mask over here, over his face and over his skin that's kind of just sitting on top of the rest of the image so we can go through and manipulate it. And then I want to add in just a little bit of contrast on that end right there, keeping an eye on my waveform, making sure we're not clipping anything, and we are not. And then maybe just a little bit of a bump here, making sure that we're not doing too much. Actually, I'm going to leave that about here because I really, again, don't want to do too much. So this is where we started, guys. This is where we're at. This is already a nice looking image. What we're gonna do now is we're gonna take this to the next level. I may actually come down on the mid-tone detail just a bit here because his hair was getting a little funky. I'm gonna push it in just a little bit, but I'm just doing a minor correction here on this curves tool. So I'm just pulling that down just a little bit. I might go ahead and just do a little bit of a black offset here, just a smidge. I don't think my extents are really clipping. Okay, yeah. So let's just go ahead and do like 0.2 on the black offset there, just to make sure that we're not clipping that bottom part. I know it's definitely going to show up as black, and that's what I want. So now we've gone through and we're almost done with this look, but the next step that we're going to do is we're really going to work this ceiling. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take two masks, right? I'm going to take 2 gradients, and because he is still this entire scene, I'm able to just go ahead, let's get him back where he's positioned. I'm going to be able to just take a look at what we're doing here, and we're going to move these and mask out everything but him, and then we're going to make it a nice soft transition. So right about there, we'll get the fringes of his hair so it looks more natural, and then right about here going into it. There we go, I like that because I don't want to mess with his face too much, but we're looking good. And I'm going to turn off the mask aspect so I can just keep an eye on what we're doing. And now we're going to manipulate these colors, but we're going to be careful not to get outside of Rec 709. So just on the sky, there we go. I'm able to push in that contrast that I really, really want overall. And I'm going to come in here again, looking at these masks, and we're going to make these a little bit more sharper, right? Because we want as much of this as possible. We don't want it just to be a little bit. We want as much of it as possible. So we're going to sharpen these lines up a little bit. Keep him just out of it. There we go. Now we can see that correction right there already on our top area of this LED ceiling right here. I'm gonna increase the mid-tone detail just a little bit more. You guys know I love me some mid-tone detail. And now we're gonna come in to our color curves here, and we're gonna use hue versus hue first. Remember how I talked about that blue? I'm gonna shift it towards teal. Why am I shifting it towards teal? Because I want, in this case, I want him to stand out just a little bit more. Now, you can see here that we are almost pushing outside of Rec 709, but the nice thing is because we're color managed, it's not gonna let us break the color space. That's why I like working in a color managed workflow. So this, I know this value isn't clipping because I've actually tested it out myself and made sure that it's still displayed on a proper Rec 709 display, so we are good. And we're just gonna really do our best here to ease in on the edges so that it doesn't look like it's just white next to his face right there, right? We could try to bring this in a little bit more. It's not too bad. I might leave it right here a little bit. And see, that's when we start getting those adverse effects on his face. So right about here is where we're gonna leave that. So we have this coming in now. I'm really liking what's going on. The next thing that I'm gonna do is I'm actually just gonna go back in here. And now we're gonna do hue versus saturation. And the reason why we're gonna do that is because I don't wanna clip my red values. So I'm gonna come back down a little bit on the red here, and then on the blue, we can come back just a little bit to make sure we're not clipping too much. And that's what we don't want. We don't want it to be clipping. So right there, we're at that 75% of the saturation value. Before and after, now the ceiling is really popping. This is where we're started. This is where we're at. And I'm really, really, really loving this grade overall. I like the way that his skin tones stand out. I like the way that he stands out from everything. There is just a little bit of a white area over here, but it doesn't bother me too much, seeing as we do have the discrepancies in the ceiling. I'm not bothered too much by what it looks like before either, because you can kind of see around this area to begin with, it looked like there was that white blotch. So to me, it still is looking nice and natural. So I guess not necessarily natural. It's definitely had some color to it, but it looks really nice overall. The last thing that I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to finish off with FilmConvert. Now, my friends over at FilmConvert don't like that I do this. I'm pretty sure they absolutely hate the fact that I don't use it in a YRGB color space, but that's because I can't bring myself to do it. I'm sorry, guys. I'm not looking for the true authenticity of the film here. And Rec 709 and sRGB are actually quite similar, and I'm not gonna get too much of a gamma shift, which is nice. What I'm more concerned about is just adding a little bit of character on top of my grade so that it's not too sterile. So what we're gonna do in this case is we're just gonna make a few adjustments off the bat. The first thing that I like to do is I like to turn down the grain strength. I don't want film grain in this image. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to turn down the film luma because I set everything really where I wanted it. So I'm going to turn that down by half to around 65. Let's go ahead and take a look at the vector scope. Yes, we are still doing good over here. Now I'm going to basically warm this up a little bit because we did have that shift. So I'm going to warm that up to right about here. That's looking good because this is a cooler film stock. I'm just going to change my tint a little bit too to give his skin tones back that authenticity that they deserve. And then I'm going to go ahead and increase my saturation just a bit. That's too much, right around here. And that's where I'm going to go ahead and end up leaving this. I want to make sure that I'm not clipping any information on that bottom end. So I'm going to go ahead and just check this waveform again and make sure, can I still see the detail in his shirt? I can. But it does look a little bit dark. So what we're going to do here is we're going to come through, because it's looking a little dark on that shirt, and I'm going to pull up the black offset just a little bit over here in the initial, just a smidge. We can see where it's at. Oh, actually, you know what? I'm going to leave it there. I like it. I'm going to put in 0.2. And that is the final grade. I can look at his skin. This is where I go through and do quality control. His skin's a little bit much, right? It's a little hot. So I'm going to pull back on the saturation of his skin in his skin tone node. So come back to do number 3. This is okay. We always come back and we finalize what our grade is. I'm going to pull back on that saturation just a little bit because it doesn't have to be so in your face. But I don't like that he looks a little bit dead now. So I'm just going to shift the area kind of in this general direction. And then I'm going to back off a little bit on how much red I've put in. And this would be my final look to go through for this before and after. To my personal taste, exactly what I'm liking. Looks like we have a little bit of a movement in our ceiling up here. So I'm just going to go ahead and denoise that a little bit too so that goes away. But yeah, I am in love. We started here before and after, and that's where I'm going to leave that final grade. Maybe push a little bit of saturation back into his skin. Awesome. So let's go ahead and move on to the next clip of what we have going on. So this was shot for my short film. It's called A Note to Self. You guys can watch it, but I actually came up with a different grade here because I was really inspired by a TV show called Defending Jacob. So what's the point of this grade? Well, first of all, this is a raw image. So now I'm going to be able to teach you guys a little bit more about my raw workflow and how I really use the power of RAW to really go ahead and make exposure decisions in the end game. So Defending Jacob has a very teal and orange look to it, but it's more so on the cooler side when it comes to the skin tones. So we're not pushing the skin tones too orange, we're really kind of desaturating them overall. So that is going to be the goal of this look, which is why I'm choosing something that has a lot of neutrals here. I'm able to push that cooler tone into those neutrals because I don't have anything else really here. And I'm gonna do something a little bit different here than we did in our first clip. You know, I set up a layer mixer here to create our look. We're not gonna do that this time around. What we're gonna end up doing is we're going to end up just keeping our skin tones separate. And you'll see why, because we're gonna use some color theory. So let's get into this. Just note, I chose this because it has neutrals, and we're gonna go through, we're gonna remap the exposure and get that nice soft filmic look and finish up with FilmConvert. So first thing that we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and change our decode quality to the full res for Canon. Our decode is going to be clip, and then we're going to change our ISO to 250. That's because I want to use all the information here in this highlight area. And you can see we're not clipping information. It may be a little bit hot in spots, and there may be some spots that are absolutely gone. But other than that, we have a nice tonal value here that I really want to work with. Now you may be saying, Sydney, will we sacrifice the rest of this? Nope, we're gonna go through it and we're gonna relight it. So back into my HDR wheels, I'm gonna raise my shadows up. I'm gonna bring my lights down just a little bit to make a more even playing field. And I'm gonna bring my darks up. Now, why am I doing that? Because I want to get a nice starting point to then go through and remap my exposure. So the only thing that we've done with the raw workflow is we've used the power of our ISO to give us a better starting point to pull out an extreme amount of information. And that's what we've done here. So from here, what I'm gonna end up doing is I'm going to go ahead and set a black point. So right around here, And then I can boost that bottom part using my curves tool to bring in a little bit of contrast right around here. Now this is not looking good in any sense of the way, I can promise you that, but I'm doing this for a reason, and you will see in just a second. I'm able to create this powerful curve to get me on the starting point of where I want to be, get that nice contrast. We did get some noise, so we're gonna come back to node 1, we're gonna reduce it. So we're gonna go through here, temporal noise reduction. We're just gonna go ahead and give that a solid, right about there, 7.7, right? So this is where we're at, right around here. Before, after, nice softness to it. We're gonna go ahead and do a skin tone key real quick, and then I'm gonna leave it alone until I start creating my look. So I'm just gonna key out the skin tones here, sharpen them up to where I want them to be, get them as close as possible. Right around here is really good. Add in some low soft. We're gonna do a little bit of denoise, just so actually, no, we're not gonna denoise. I'm gonna do clean blacks to fill in those other spots where I don't necessarily want that. Maybe blur the radius just a little bit, right? So we're gonna leave the skin tones alone. We're gonna come through, we're gonna really remap them with the look. We're just going in and setting up the basis for this look, right? So the reason why I put the skin tones here though, is because I wanted them to have the contrast, the color contrast still. I'm gonna cool down this image, and I don't want the blue in the skin to start affecting other areas. So this allows me to get a tight key, which is why I put that in node 3. From here in node 4, I'm actually going to set up a little thing that I call film halation. So we're gonna set up a layer here, and then we're gonna do another layered, another serial node. To set up film halation, just to give you the quick rundown, it's where you kind of get the highlights to bloom just a little bit. It's not gonna be too prevalent. It's just a very subtle thing that adds some nice subtlety to this look. I'm gonna go ahead and put a color space transform here and a color space transform here. And I know that my input color space is going to be Canon log 2. So we're gonna go input gamma, Canon log 2, and I'm gonna change that to linear. And then I'm gonna undo this. We're gonna go from linear to Canon log 2. I skipped L. Linear to Canon log 2. The reason why we put this in linear, let me find Canon log 2 real quick, is because that allows us to see the information this way. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to bring this all the way down, set a midpoint right around here. Oop, excuse me. And I'm just gonna bring up the top end of this just a little bit. Right around here. And then I'm getting just those highlights right there. And what I'm gonna do here from here is I'm gonna change the composite mode to add, and now you'll see the little subtlety that happened. Do you see that? It's very, very subtle. And then just to sell it a little bit more, I'm gonna go ahead and unlink my blur radius and just mix the colors in right about here. So it's a very subtle pop on the highlights. It's just the very top portions of the image. It's nothing too crazy. The majority of our look comes together in FilmConvert. So we're gonna add one more node, and now we're gonna go ahead and add in FilmConvert. So this is a beautiful starting point already, but the main thing that I'm gonna wanna do here is I'm gonna wanna go ahead and play with my black point and my midpoint. And this is how I really found I get this dramatic look that I'm going for. When I raise my black point, you can see it adds in just a little bit of darkness on this area, which is exactly what I want. We're not clipping anything, but then I'm gonna move my midpoint. I'm gonna move my midpoint to right about there, because what this does, it gives me this nice subtlety that I'm going for. I'm gonna go more so right around here, right? Look at that. Now we may be a little too hard on our initial contrast over here. So I'm gonna, I like that a lot. I'm actually liking where we're at. Okay, you know what? No, I'm not gonna settle that down because that's not Is that clipping? Let's see if we can tell real quick. Hold on. So this is my process. Okay, so we can see here that we're really just pushing 0 nits, and that's fine because this, I promise you guys, this look is very dark. Their blacks are black in this series. So that's really what I'm going for here. Maybe just add a little bit of slight contrast right there. Not slight contrast, but just pull that level up. Okay, so you saw that micro adjustment that I made right there. Oh, I hate that word, micro adjustment. Just to make sure that we weren't getting rid of too much information. But now what we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna do is we're really gonna tie in this look. So I'm just gonna get rid of the green that we have going on here by pushing in a little magenta. And then, sorry for the rambling, just trying to get my thought process together. So now that our midpoint and everything is set up, I'm gonna come over to our Open Effects overlay, and I'm going to start adding in those colors that I want, right? So I'm looking for, again, we're cooling this image off. These values do mix. I want the whites just a little bit more on the whiter side. And I'm gonna want these blues here to be, again, more on the teal side. I'm not gonna drop that down too much. Oops, come back. So it's a very subtly blue look. I'm gonna add in my film grain for sure. This is about where I want it. Now the only thing that's gonna be different now is I can come through and manipulate my skin tones, right? See how I'm doing that? To exactly where I want them to be. Let me pull out the saturation here too, because I want this to be a really desaturated look. I'm gonna come back into my skin tones now, and I want them to be on the cooler side. Still want them to have some definition. Might add in a little bit of mid-tone detail into the skin so it pops just a smidge. Just a smidge, right about there. I'm going to film response a little bit here too. Really just to add in just a little bit more of that highlight bump right there. I just want these to be bumped up a little bit more. I'm liking what we have going on here. So that is the basis to this. It looks very, very nice. I kind of like what we have going on here with the skin. It stands out nice and neat. If I come back over to my vector scope, not my vector scope, yeah, actually my vector scope, I can see here we have a slight teal and orange grade going on here, which is exactly what I was going for. Just to recap, we started with node 1. We can break down this look exactly how everything worked out. Let's turn every node off and do that. So we started here. We ended up remapping and adding in some noise reduction. So we lifted up our shadows, and then we bumped in that contrast right about there. You know what? I'm thinking, looking at this look, I'm gonna go through and redo something again. We added in our skin tones. We added in our highlight halation, or film halation, my bad. And then we went ahead and added in the look with FilmConvert, which is awesome. I think the only thing I'm actually gonna do here differently, I'm gonna bump this up, and I'm still gonna bring this back down. It's gonna give me some sharper contrast there. Not to the point where I'm clipping, right about there. And I like where we're at there. This is more so what I'm going for. Let's get that dramaticness over the eye right over here. Maybe add in just a little bit of mid-tone, not mid-tone, some black offset just to raise the blacks up a little bit. But this is what I was going for. This is what I like. So again, going through quality control, you're always able to just check out those variables and make sure you're getting everything exactly where you want it. So before and after we went through and did all of that. So a total of 9 nodes to get this look. Again, this is just a tutorial, so I would go back and refine it a little bit more, but this is where we're at. So let's say that you guys don't have log footage or anything like that. You're just working with Rec 709 footage. Well, this was actually shot in Rec 709. This is a drone clip, and you can see here we have the rolling hills, we have these highlights, and then we have these beautiful, beautiful green trees, and it's very foggy. So there's this depth, there's this layer to this image. What do we do with this? Well, again, it's really about knowing what can we do with the colors that we have. I want to go on the edge and choose an analogous color scheme again. I want to go kind of orange-green in these trees. Yellow-orange, I guess, would be more so. I want to add some brown basically to the trees. That's the color I'm looking for. Then we'll have orange highlights. So overall, we're gonna warm this scene up a little bit, and then we'll finish it off again with FilmConvert. So looking at our waveform, let's go ahead and add that back in. I'm going to do our initial exposure corrections just a bit. I'm gonna bring down the highlights because we are clipping that sun. The specular highlights, this is why we go ahead and we have that HDR color space in there, why we did the resolve wide gamut. And so we have that there. So this is the sun. That's okay. We're not going to capture the sun. And then I'm just going to go ahead and bump up some contrast again by putting it into the shadows just right here, kind of creating a more dramatic look. Increase the saturation just a bit. Bring down the lights maybe a bit too. I want them right about there. And from here, right, so the same thing that we've been doing, we can start going a little bit quicker through this. This is where I'm gonna bump up the contrast and just add a slight S-curve to it, right around here. And then I'm gonna go ahead and add some mid-tone detail in the beginning too, just to get a little bit of a pop throughout those trees. You guys see I love mid-tone detail unless it's on skin. From here, I wanna go ahead and do two things. I'm gonna add 2 nodes because this is only gonna be a 4-node grade. I'm gonna add FilmConvert on the end, take out that grain, and then I'm gonna warm it up so we're right about there. Cool, so that's the start of that. Now I'm gonna go back in on node 3, and using these areas, I'm gonna use my knowledge of color theory to add in that orange that I want. So to get that brown going on in the trees, I'm gonna go ahead and just add that into the shadows. So when I add in that red and we mix that in using our knowledge of color theory, we're making the color brown. Let me check my darks. So in my darks, what I'm gonna do, just wanna throw in a little bit more green down there. You see it's a very subtle change right there. See before and after, we're adding in that green. If we want it more extreme to see what's going on here, you can kind of see how that's being affected. So very subtle change in the green on the bottom portion of that. And then to really sell this, I want to transition my highlights to this warmer color. So I'm gonna add in just a little bit of a yellow green here. And then in my full on highlights, I wanna add more of an orange. Okay, that's a little bit too much. So bad idea. We're gonna bring our light region down a little bit. That's what we're gonna do. So we're encompassing more. You can see how we did that there. And I'll go through and throw it in that way. And then when we look in our waveform on our vector scope, my bad, you can kind of see we have all these colors kind of together. That was the whole point of this. I don't know if we need to be that dark, you know what I'm saying? There we go. We don't need to be that dark. I like what we have going on here. Awesome. So I kind of want this to stand out just a little bit. There we go. That's what I want to do. I'm going to back off so how much orange we're putting in there. I'm going to keep it on the greener side because that to me feels overall more where I was headed, that desaturated green in that area. And go ahead and just take a look, not at the parades, take a look at the waveform again. And in the darks, that's where we can create, we'll keep it there. We're gonna keep there. That'll be the end of that grade. But that was just pretty quick and simple on what you can do. Again, you don't have to worry about inputting your color space because you're already in Direct 709. And so you can just make subtle changes. You can also leave it here, just increase the saturation if you wanted a more natural look, but that's not what I was going for. I wanted to add in just a little bit of this mountainous, gritty vibe to it. And this is what I'm gonna come up with. We can also add in some film grain here too, just a smidge right around here. And there's different film stocks with FilmConvert. I just like the Kodak 5207 film stock, but there's tons of different ones here. I actually believe I used this one originally and I moved my midpoint down a little bit. I used the original Fuji 8553 ET film stock. And from there, I can actually be a little bit more dramatic on that black point, you see? So again, a completely different look and feel here, but still awesome tone. So keep in mind that all of these factors can change something. You'll just have to go through and readjust certain aspects of it. So the last one that we have here is this clip. And this is another great example of thinking about our colors beforehand, right? So what can we do here? We have a sky and we have all this orange. The best thing that we're gonna be able to do to create a look is to maximize the colors and really make them pop. So making this more on the orange side, moving this red or this orange red to a more of an orange, and then pulling out some blue in the sky to really give us a complementary color tone. So first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna input our color space. This was exposed to the right by a lot, so that's gonna look like it's clipped, but it's not. This is why I love Resolve, because with just a few adjustments, we're able to bring back that information. So I'm gonna bring this down by 2 stops. This was about right. It was probably exposed to the right by 3 stops, actually. So there we go. That's kind of where I wanna be. And then I'm just gonna go through and do those initial exposure corrections. So I wanna bring down those specular highlights just so it's not doing too much. And do I wanna bring down the highlights here? I might boost up the highlights just a little bit, but bring down the lights. And the reason I did that is because I don't wanna get muddy tones. Because if I bring these highlights down, you can see you start to get into losing that shine that comes with the sun being right there. But actually, you know what? I'm gonna bring that down too. We're gonna bring all those down because I actually like the way that looks. See, as a colorist, I always make decisions throughout the look that I'll do differently each and every time. This is not clipping, so I'm gonna leave this exactly where it is. From here though, we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna add in a curve to bump up that contrast in that higher area. So we did bring it down, but this is an overall curve that's really gonna brighten the image. Do I wanna bring this down a little bit more? We'll bring this down just a little bit more too. So now we have that nice contrast going on. Let's take a look at her skin tones. Her skin's, yes, I like that. So just a nice little S curve there. We're gonna leave the black point where it is, and I like where that shadow is. I like that ratio we've created with that shadow. Let's look at our before. Let's look at our after. So far, this could pass. Now what we're gonna go ahead and do is we're going to key out her skin tones. And this is complicated, right? Because of what we have going on here. So we're gonna qualify out our skin tones now, and we're gonna shrink all of our data points to the best of our abilities. Because we really don't want to affect anything else but her skin. I'm gonna choose the saturation value here. Low soft. Right about here is what I'm gonna choose for our skin tone qualification. That way when we look, we're still just affecting her skin. We're gonna go through and we're gonna mix these values in just a second, but just a rough qualification of the skin because I didn't want what I'm going to do next to affect her skin. So we will mix these together, but here's what I want it to do. So I want it to take our hue versus hue curves now, but I didn't want to affect her skin too much. And I want to make those just a little bit more on the oranger side, on the red side. So right about there. It's a very subtle change. And then I want to increase the saturation of that as well. But first, we're going to take a note of this blue over here, and we're going to push that more on that teal side. I'm going to take this red as well. So yeah, that's exactly what I wanted. We're going to do here now. We're going to make that a little bit more orange. You see that we have this information over here. We're going to make this a little bit more orange. Right about here. Oops, nope, we're going to bring this down. So that's more on the orange side. With her skin tones now, we can come back here. Just going to push a little bit of orange into them. And then on this red side, I'm going to add in a little bit of life. Just a little bit of red. You'll see what's going on in the look. Everything's going to come together at the last minute when we add on FilmConvert because it does smooth out some of those issues that we will have here. Hue versus saturation. This is what I wanted. So now that we've gotten this in here, I want to increase the saturation of my blue area, that teal area. And I'm going to need to come into the lights, not the lights, not the highlights, but our speculars, to really add in that overall blue tone that I want it going on in there as well. Just to bring some life into the sky. Let's go ahead and double check, make sure that as we're going through this, yes, when we're looking at her skin, what we've keyed out, it's looking nice. All right, so now we're gonna add our final step in, which is going into FilmConvert. You can see here that smoothed out a lot of little problems and the idiosyncrasies we thought we were gonna have. And I'm gonna boost up the saturation just a bit. And now that I'm looking at this sky, I'm like, okay, I don't like that color. I don't like what I have going on here. So let's move it more towards the blue side. Let's see what we can get out of this. I want something, and it's not wanting to work too well with me, so I think I'm just gonna go subtly on the blue. Just very subtle. We've brought that down, and I can make this more, that's too green, so I can move it towards magenta. There we go. But maybe not too much. There we go. Let's see what happens when I cool this down a little bit. It's a little bit nicer on the skin tones. I'm gonna come back here to our skin tones, because I'm just fine tuning this at this point. I'm gonna not be so harsh on that red I'm adding in and really just try to equalize them out. Right about there. Adding in some mid-tone detail too, so that she can stand out a little bit more and pop, and a little bit of mid-tone detail overall into the scene as a whole. Nope, not into the scene as a whole. I'm just gonna leave that there on the skin. So when we're looking at this and this grade that we have, look at that. Overall, very, very nice with what we have going on. It looks like her hand is red. We have to remember that's the red coming off of the reflection from the Harley Davidson bike. But overall, a beautiful scene. I did not shoot this. My cinematographer friend, Dylan Patrick did. So just to keep that in mind. Overall, I think a 7-node grade. Looks awesome though. And so we were able to get a nice complementary color scheme going and really just able to elevate what we had going on. Because if we didn't do that, that's what this looked like. And that's the whole point. That was how we created our look. We were able to make it pop by just those tiny, minute adjustments. So again, guys, as you can see throughout this tutorial and everything that we've done, the biggest thing that we can do is control our variables in post-production. And when creating looks where those variables aren't controlled, really leveraging what we can do with the power and our knowledge of color theory. But when we do have our variables controlled, we know that we're able to produce the images that we like. Just by using all the tools at our disposal in DaVinci Resolve, we were able to create these two looks starting from this. I mean, come on guys, that's not bad what we did here. Oops, there we go. Let's just look at where we started here. Look at these. And this is what we turned them into. So guys, color grading is not that complicated. Just make sure that you're using your tools and your knowledge and put it into practice, and always remember to plan beforehand. 45 minutes is such a short amount of time to pack all of this information on color grading into one single video. So like I said, guys, if you have any questions, please leave them in the comment section down below. And if you guys like this video, just be sure to give me a big thumbs up, hit that subscribe button, turn on those post notifications. If you have not, be sure to share this video with somebody who might need it. And be sure to follow me on my social media. The links are in the description down below, as well as the YouTube fam. Their links are also in the description down below. My beautiful people, if you guys are ever feeling uninspired, uncreative, or just want to give up on life, remember, every day airplanes take off against the wind. Keep climbing, stay inspired, guys. And as always, stay fabulous. My name is Sydney, and I will see you beautiful people next time. Peace out.